Perhaps tomorrow will feel better, or perhaps the day after that, or maybe the day following that one brings salvation. Every time this mantra is repeated, it feels like deferring something that has long clawed to escape the chest. It is as if time holds a secret covenant, a promise only granted if we can endure just one more day. Yet, for some reason, every tomorrow appears as a horizon, something theoretically visible but impossible to touch. Logic dictates that one simply lies down, falls asleep, and tomorrow should arrive. But sometimes we realize we aren't truly waiting for a better day. Perhaps we are merely trying to convince ourselves that what we feel today is not eternal, that there is a tiny point in the unknown future with the potential to change everything, even if we don't know when or how. Or maybe we just need a reason to keep walking. Because if that reason didn't exist, perhaps tomorrow we would lose the only thing that fuels our daily steps. Yet, there is something gentle in the act of hoping, a small desire that refuses to be extinguished. And maybe, for today, that is enough. But is it really? Or will we remain trapped in the same torment, feeling pathetic like this, failing again, and only able to hang our hopes on the chance that tomorrow becomes a moment of victory? Since childhood, we are told that life is fun, that life always moves forward, and the future surely offers something better. But the reality is, most of us may not be moving anywhere. We are frozen in the same spot. Worse yet, we often blame ourselves for not succeeding, and blaming the world doesn't mean we hate life. It could be that we blame the world because we understand it was never designed for everyone to win the game. In a reality born of failure and birthing creatures destined for defeat, there is no space truly filled with victory. There is no neutral arena. Everything is a field of competition, and every field demands winners and losers. Perhaps one of the deepest principles of this reality is that it functions as a zero-sum game, where one party's success is always paid for by another party's defeat. The entire art of living might lie in the skill of utilizing the very individuals who are the source of our suffering. It is not difficult to see how the world forces every living being into this competitive pattern. In ecology, every species fights for the same resources. Two male lions clash over identical territory. Two great trees overshadow each other until one starves for light. Even in the wild, victory almost always arrives alongside the defeat of another. This is reflected in our human social systems. We compete for position, status, and recognition. Students compete for rankings, workers fight for promotions, creators battle for public attention that grows scarcer by the day. Even in morality, humans judge goodness within a frame of disguised competition. We want to be the most patient, the most forgiving, or the wisest, as if goodness cannot stand without finding someone worse than us. From social media algorithms that amplify only a few voices, to corporations providing scarce seats at the table, from political systems to the simplest social structures, the world is built on a logic of exclusion. Where there is a palace, there must be a moat. Where there is a leader, there must be followers whose voices are unheard. Since the dawn of civilization, we see the glory of one nation built upon the conquest of another. Rome grew from the soil of fallen nations. The Industrial Revolution was fueled by wealth taken from elsewhere. And in our daily lives, this logic appears in its most subtle forms. Giant corporations rise, only because countless small endeavors fall. One person finds peace in a luxury high-rise, only because invisible night workers keep the machinery of the city running. A student shines brightly, only because there are classmates left in the shadows. The world operates on an uneven distribution of roles. Who is allowed to be seen, and who must always remain part of the background? who has the right to step onto the stage, and who must remain silent behind the curtain, who owns a name, and who is merely a number and a statistic. As explained by Toby Ord in his book, The Precipice: Existential Risk in the Future of Humanity, it is not impossible that we will have nations, ideological blocks, or even planets and new branches of Homo sapiens, trapped in destructive competition. They strive as hard as possible for their own group's interest, yet create disastrous consequences for the whole. We are constantly taught to live rationally, to think logically, to make data-driven decisions, and to organize life as efficiently as possible. But this way of living comes at a price. When everyone competes rationally and efficiently for their own self-interest, the world slowly transforms into a cold space where we inadvertently hurt one another. We may enter a situation where, ultimately, no one truly wins, not because of malicious intent, but because the system itself drags us to that point. This is the most terrifying form of dystopia, one that perhaps has been unfolding without us realizing it. This dystopia is not a destruction that arrives through explosive violence, but an emptiness born of logic executed too perfectly. A world where we all play to win, but end up slowly consuming each other without even noticing. In this scenario, major actors like nations, ideologies, or future species act on logic that seems sound from their perspective. They maximize power, security, or prosperity. Every decision appears rational and defensive. But when all sides behave this way, the collective result of that competition births deep and widespread ruin. Individual rationality eventually gives birth to collective madness. The world of the zero-sum game is an existential trap. It concerns not only the distribution of resources, but how meaning itself is constructed. We are not defined by who we are, but by our position on the ladder of comparison. Being a good human is not enough. One must be better than others to be considered valuable. Kindness loses its original substance because it relies on relative superiority. In this view, the only kindness considered special is kindness that no one else has performed before. As explained by Rene Girard, the core of human behavior is imitation. We are, by nature, highly skilled mimics. Since childhood, we learn almost everything by copying language, values, tastes, and even desires. According to Girard, the human brain is nothing more than an enormous imitating machine. But there is a deeper, more dangerous layer of imitation, acquisitive mimesis. Acquisitive mimesis is the desire to possess something, not for its need or objective value, but solely because someone else desires it. We do not just copy actions, we copy desires. And this is where the root of conflict lies, when two people want the exact same thing, because both are imitating each other's desires. The battle occurs not for the object itself. In the beginning, the object might not even be important, but for the desire triggered by comparison. Girard thus makes animals seem like our kin, showing that they submit to the same fundamental law, the law to prevent the inevitable conflict when two or more greedy hands move toward the same object. And therefore, failure is not just possible, it is actually required. For one person to succeed, another must fail. The world does not need everyone to be a winner. It only needs enough losers to make winning feel exclusive. This is why most of our failures are not failures in the objective sense, but failures of hierarchy. We are told we lost because we were not fast enough, not smart enough, not attractive enough, or not valuable enough. We are considered failures not because we are incapable, but because we did not succeed in outperforming someone else. Ironically, in this zero-sum world, even the winners are just as trapped as the losers. There is no final victory here. Today we may be at the peak, But tomorrow we must prove ourselves again, and again, and again. At any moment we can fall, becoming prisoners of a desire that never ends, a desire ignited by others and locked by the perpetual competition between us. The most heartbreaking part is when this zero-sum narrative seeps into our deepest consciousness. We begin to view life as a permanent competition. We begin to doubt our own worth simply because we cannot defeat anyone. We fear being helpless. We worry we cannot try again. We might even fear the simple act of thinking about life itself. The chest tightens when opening social media and seeing others' lives appear far more put together. The stomach knots when a message goes unanswered, when a job application is rejected, or when the numbers on a report card or bank account seem to mock us. Those nights where we stare at the bedroom ceiling, feeling that not a single place in the world is truly waiting for our presence. At that point, failure stops being merely a social status and transforms into the way we experience existence. We no longer say, "I failed at this thing," but slowly internalize, "I am the failure." Identity and event merge into one. Perhaps that is one of the greatest tragedies. Failure is no longer just something that happens, but becomes something we mistake for our very self. Then, how could we not feel like failures? If the entire order of this world only provides space for a handful of winners and a sea of losers, how is it possible to feel enough if self-worth is measured only by rank? In this kind of game, even those reluctant to play are still judged by the game's results. Maybe it is true that we are merely passing down the nonsense inherited from our predecessors. We are forced to accept absurdity as normalcy. We live in a reality we never chose. Perhaps it is time we stop blaming ourselves. No matter how many failures we have endured, none of it is entirely our fault. The world simply loves failure, and we are just trying to imagine that we can survive, that we can live, and that we can reach the end. As Albert Camus said, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. We must imagine Sisyphus happy, imagine, even simply to contemplate happiness. We need to borrow an image from a French philosopher, whose name is too often cited on the internet by teenagers, using unsourced quotes that circulate endlessly on TikTok and Instagram. Imagine that just to be happy, we must first imagine it. But it could be that we never truly wanted anything at all. We are not even sure what we desire, or perhaps we simply wish to be in the most comfortable place, a space where we are required to do absolutely nothing. The idea of always being a winner is not just terrifying, it is nauseating. The image of becoming a doctor, an astronaut, an engineer, or becoming anything at all often feels so impossibly distant to us. It is as if we are obligated to become something in this life, required to be the winner in every chapter, and ultimately must always reach a good ending. But is it true that humans were created merely to endure all of this and then die? What is actually wrong with this life? For thousands of years, great minds have sought a way to solve the entirety of life's problems, to resolve every difficulty we face. Yet, it seems they have always met with failure. They constructed systems of logic, designed theories of justice, and formulated the essence of good and evil. They attempted to close a void that can never be fully filled. From Plato to Camus, from Confucius to Jordan Peterson, all carried a similar mission: to find a rational basis for human goodness. But almost always, the end of these ideas is the same. Their grand concepts crumble the moment they meet actual reality. Truthfully, we have never really understood where the error lies, and it is not impossible that the error was embedded from the very beginning. When the first human consciousness began to grasp reality, began to ask about meaning, truth, and purpose, perhaps that was the moment we started creating expectations that never aligned with this dark universe. Yet, If we had never asked, perhaps we could have lived peacefully like animals, living only in the present moment, without the need to regret the past or worry about the future. In 1898, Marie Curie discovered radium, a substance that appeared incredibly beautiful. It radiated light and opened a new era in the world of science. Curie did not know that this tiny beam was slowly devouring her body. She stirred uranium ore with her bare hands, kept tubes of radiation in her drawer, and even slept beside them. She was mesmerized by the light that was silently eroding her. She won 2 Nobel Prizes, but the very same material, which is now used to treat cancer and provide hope for life, was precisely what killed its discoverer. From there, we learn that perhaps there is no discovery without risk. There is no knowledge that is pure and sterile without a costly exchange. All progress demands sacrifice, time, body, or sanity, and often, without us realizing, our own lives demand a similar price. We do not need to discover radium to be burned, because in our daily existence, we are already paying for something we do not fully understand. When working, loving, surviving, and hoping, there is always a part of the self that erodes. So is it possible to desire a life free of exchange, without fatigue, without destruction? Maybe. We are never truly free from anything. We must do this and that, until even rest is unable to heal the weariness we carry. All of this happens not because we are weak, not because we are foolish, but because this stage of reality has been fractured since long before we were born into it. We were not born into a world that is clean and pristine, but into a reality full of illusions, contradictions, and vast inequalities. A world where the righteous can lose and lies can reign supreme. A world that appears neat on the surface, but is internally full of jagged tears. As we gaze upon reality with greater scrutiny, we begin to understand that our error lies not merely in our incompetence. There is something more fundamental, something wrong in the very mechanics of how this world works. Perhaps we need to cast our gaze elsewhere, neither upward, seeking transcendental answers, nor inward, seeking existential ones, but at the structure of reality itself. From childhood, we are raised with the grand conviction that humans are special beings, the pinnacle of evolution. We feel we are a species capable of conquering the world. We erect cities with towers that pierce the heavens. We build machines that outrun the wind. We tame the atom, voyaged to the moon, and even mapped our own genetic code. It is as if we are little creators, capable of rewriting the script of life. In textbooks, in religious scripts, to state speeches, the same narrative repeats endlessly, that we have successfully mastered the world. But the more we look back through geological history, biology, and civilization itself, that conviction begins to crack. If the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, then the existence of Homo sapiens is but the final fraction of a second in that vast span of time. We have only existed for about 300,000 years, and the agricultural civilization that birthed written history is barely 10,000 years old. This world was not shaped by humans, nor for humans. We are merely late arrivals. The conviction that we control the world is likely just an illusion, designed to make us feel safe and comfortable. In fact, we have never truly held power over the world. We are merely attempting to survive within it as best we can. Even with all the science and technology we possess today, we remain unable to conquer the sadness, the loneliness, and the uncertainty that relentlessly follows us. We still regret the past and fear the future. To be human means living in exile, and perhaps that is the most honest reality of all. We are forever distant from nature, separated from one another. and most painfully, alienated from our own selves. We do not even know with certainty who we are supposed to be. Life continues, yet we are unsure of where we are actually heading. The world is more like the ruins of an ancient city that remains inhabited, repaired, while at the same time being destroyed again. We know that many great events in human history often begin with the word war. The Peloponnesian War changed the face of Greece through bloodshed between Sparta and Athens. World War II destroyed the global order, swallowing more than 60 million lives. Even now, war still occurs in various corners of the earth, showing that the modern world is never free from the madness of conflict. We inherit warfare and destruction, so it is not surprising if everything in the world holds traces of failure. Beauty appears occasionally, but only as a pause, never as the permanent pattern. As expressed by Jacques Rancière in Le Sensible, imperfection is not an anomaly as we might think, but rather the most basic structure of all aspects of life. Everything, from distant stars to the nucleus of cells within our bodies, holds traces of primal imperfection that can be proven materially. Since our arrival, we have inherited a world that was already broken, and in such a condition, who can truly expect their life to run perfectly? When we ask about the position of failure, we are actually questioning our own initial condition. How can we expect to always succeed if we were born into a world that failed first? Every step, every dream, every effort we make must face the reality that we live in a system not designed to provide perfection or success. Ironically, we grow up in a world that worships success, yet rarely provides space to explain where failure comes from. We are taught to run, to reach the peak, to break limits, but we are never taught how to accept the ruins, how to keep standing on the debris, and how to remain human. Since childhood, we are flooded with images of winning figures, but we are never given a framework to explain just how common it is to be on the losing side. As a result, when life presents a reality that does not fit the narrative of victory, we feel confused, angry, and ashamed. It feels as if we've betrayed destiny, yet in truth, we are merely reading the same chapter of this book of life. More than that, the modern era adds a new, more subtle layer, meritocracy, and the culture of self-improvement. We are told that anyone can succeed, provided they try hard enough. If you want to succeed, you must be disciplined, manage your time, and correct your mindset. At a glance, this sounds liberating, but hidden within is a much darker message, that if we fail, the fault lies entirely with us, not the system, not history, not inequality, but us alone. It is as if we possess such immense control to determine our own fate. Motivational books, inspirational videos, self-help seminars, all carry a similar message, that your life is entirely in your hands. Yet reality is not that simple. We never chose the family we were born into, our economic conditions, our mental health, our social environment, or even what kind of world we entered. But when meritocracy is turned into a kind of new religion, we learn to feel shame not just because we failed, but because we are deemed imperfect in managing a life that has limped along from the very start. The whole world does not run on a fair system of achievement. We can study with everything we have and still not pass. We can love with all our heart and still be abandoned. We can take care of our health and still fall ill. Or we can do good and still be suspected or judged poorly. In such a world, chaos appears clearly. and life never promises a reward equal to our effort. The world is indeed unfair, and perhaps it was never designed to be fair. Even when we try to arrange our own fate with various methods, through the best education or meticulous plans, we can still slip due to factors beyond our reach. We are creatures of limitation, living in a system full of boundaries, trying to reach things that may be beyond our ability. And that is the strangest paradox of human existence. We keep dreaming of perfection, while living amidst an imperfection we cannot avoid. If we look back at history, we will find that all great achievements are also built upon piling failures. Civilization was never built by hands clean of mistakes. Everything was once wrong. Every philosopher, scientist, and artist faced their own forms of failure, rejection, exile, doubt, or loss. But ironically, the world only glorifies their success and intentionally erases the parts filled with pain. We are forced to swallow a polished representation of life, presented in beautiful narratives without wounds. Yet deep down, we know none of it is entirely true. So it is not surprising if we feel like losers when not a single one of our dreams comes true. We fail not because we are lazy or lack effort, but because we were not trained to live in a reality we cannot control. We grow up in the illusion that life can be mastered with discipline, strategy, and hard work, whereas reality is often random, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel without reason. From that point, we begin to question everything. Does life truly have rules? Is there meaning in all this suffering? Or perhaps the world was never designed to save anyone? On the right shoulder of the Orion constellation lies a giant star named Betelgeuse. It has shined for over 10 million years, a span of time difficult for us to imagine. It is old and luminous. Yet in 2019, Betelgeuse suddenly dimmed drastically. In an event scientists call the Great Dimming, Betelgeuse may have witnessed the history of the cosmos far longer than the existence of planet Earth, but now it stands on the verge of twilight. Try to reflect. Of every star we gaze at tonight, how many will explode as supernovae? Of every person we meet today, how many will be gone tomorrow? Of the hopes we are building, how many will crumble in time? Of what we currently possess, how much will be lost? Perhaps the time has come to reevaluate our relationship with reality. It is time we realized that nothing truly functions as it should. There is no system that is completely intact, no life that is truly tidy. The world that welcomes us is not a beautiful garden, nor a stage of justice. The world is simply structurally unstable. When we speak of the world, we are speaking of a material order bound by the laws of physics, driven by causality, and subject to the principles of entropy. Since the very beginning of its existence, the structure of nature has carried inherent flaws, making it never truly balanced. One of the most basic weaknesses of this world lies in a very fundamental principle, entropy. The laws of thermodynamics state that every closed physical system moves toward a condition of maximum disorder. The world never directs itself toward neat order. It always moves slowly but surely toward a dispersal of energy that can no longer be used. Heat death, the final fate of the universe, occurs when all free energy reaches a point of equilibrium, so that no further change is possible. In other words, the world is inherently heading toward a condition without function. As explained by Lawrence Krauss, we live in a universe now dominated by the cosmological constant. The consequence is that the limits of empirical knowledge will narrow over time. The universe, even on time scales we can still imagine, will become increasingly difficult to comprehend. Furthermore, in such a universe, the good days both literally and metaphorically, are numbered. There is no internal mechanism that guarantees the continuity of our existence, even on the grandest scale. Gravity, the force that shapes galaxies and sculpts cosmic structures, is also the force that causes the collapse of stars, the collision of galaxies, and the destruction of the very fabric of space-time. Phenomena such as supernovae, black holes, and radioactive decay are signs that this system was never designed to endure forever. It was formed only to persist as long as possible, before finally collapsing. There is no tidy grand plan, no seamless design. Everything is riddled with plot holes. Edward Tryon, a modern cosmologist, stated that the universe may have emerged from a quantum disturbance in the void, not from order. When the universe appeared, it simultaneously canceled out that void. Everything is truly chaotic, and unfortunately, that is not just a metaphor. Entropy continues to increase, energy becomes more dispersed, and structures slowly collapse. There is no law to stop the damage, only laws that regulate its speed. There is no space free from intervention. When everything builds and destroys each other at the same time, then reality is a contradiction that functions only temporarily. Logically, the world cannot serve as a foundation for any value system. It even fails to provide the most basic ontological certainty that something will remain as it is, because in this world, nothing is fixed. There is no guarantee of form, wholeness, or consistency. The world is a machine that lost its way from the very beginning, yet keeps moving because it has not yet met total resistance. Chaos, disorder, and randomness are not deviations from reality, but the very core of how reality works. And perhaps a picture closer to us can be seen in the history of Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1805, Napoleon Bonaparte stood at the peak of his glory. In the Battle of Austerlitz, known as the Battle of the Three Emperors, he drove back the combined forces of Austria and Russia in just one day. With brilliant strategy and accurate mastery of the terrain, he fractured his old enemies and forced the great empires to retreat. That victory made him more than just a commander. He became an emperor. Napoleon became a symbol of the victor, a kind of Übermensch, perhaps. But what Napoleon did not understand was that he could still lose. And the climax occurred during his invasion of Russia in 1812. 7 years later, he brought more than 600,000 troops of the Grande Armée, the greatest military force in Europe at the time, but he was not fighting against men alone, but against something far stronger than humans: weather, hunger, distance, and time. The Russian winter became a kind of invisible guardian protecting its country. The Russian winter destroyed the horses, severed all logistical supplies, and drove the troops to starvation and desertion. Only about 100,000 soldiers returned, less than 20%, and they came home without a shred of victory. After that invasion, Napoleon was no longer an emperor. He became a nobody. Many called him a criminal. Finally, he was exiled to the island of St. Helena, a remote location in the South Atlantic, far from the glitter of power and the noise of the world. There, he spent the rest of his life writing, reflecting, and slowly being forgotten by the world he once held in his hand. He died on May 5th, 1821, from stomach cancer. Far from the European mainland he had once set ablaze with ambition. With such vast ambition, Napoleon collapsed. Not because he was a coward, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he waged war against nature itself. He forgot that humans have limits that ambition cannot cross. Our bodies are incredibly fragile biological designs for facing such a harsh world. We are born without armor, without the ability to run, and for years depend entirely on others. We are not the strongest predators. We are not the fastest, strongest, nor the most resilient creatures. We cannot see in the dark, nor survive without air. We are physically weak. Yet that fragility is not our fault. But if it is not our fault, then whose fault is it? In reality, almost all creatures that have ever lived on Earth were also weak. About 90% of all species that have ever existed are now extinct. According to National Geographic, when Earth's ecosystems undergo major damage, extinction can happen abruptly. Many species vanish in vast numbers, disappearing only to leave behind biological traces passed down through time. But more disturbing than the mere loss of billions of species is the reality that in many cases, the cause of extinction is not just external factors like meteors or volcanic eruptions. It is the system of life itself that can be the cause. In the long history of evolution, all living things scramble, compete, evolve, and adapt as best they can to survive. But often, that struggle causes them to eliminate one another. The environment changes, and not all life is capable of chasing that change within our own bodies. In the realm of genetics, a similar pattern emerges. Approximately 70 to 80% of genetic mutations affecting proteins are detrimental, or even fatal. And as researched by Lee, Viz, and Mars, it is increasingly recognized that protein interfaces are the epicenter of mutations associated with disease. We have no place to run. Even emotionally, we are just as fragile. Evolution never aimed to make humans happy. Evolution has only one metric: whether we can live long enough to pass on our genes or not. That is all. Evolution programmed us to always be alert to threats for the sake of survival. In the past, anxiety was a crucial mechanism that kept our ancestors alive. The problem is, in a modern world that is relatively safe, that same vigilance system is still active. The problem is, in this era, anxiety no longer saves us. It has instead become a massive barrier to many dreams. In Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, Robert Sapolsky explains that the stress system, once effective for escaping lions, becomes a boomerang when used to worry about abstract things, like failure or social expectations. We live in a society with unreasonable performance standards. Today, life is no longer about being enough, but about always being more successful, faster, superior, stronger. Meanwhile, failure is no longer considered part of the process, but as an identity. Those who fail are shunned. Those who are weak are looked down upon. Those who fail lose not only opportunities, but lose everything, to the point where they might be reluctant to even recognize themselves. The world makes performance the sole measure of human value. Yet, as Alain de Botton wrote in Status Anxiety, most of our anxiety stems from the fear that we do not appear successful in the eyes of others. We live not to truly live life, but to display ourselves as if we are living life correctly. It is hard to remain calm when ignored or made into a laughingstock. It is hard to resist the urge to pretend to be something we are not. It is hard not to compare ourselves with others. And it is hard to believe that human worth cannot be measured by social status or material success. What is called failure is often born not from a lack of ability, but from a misalignment between humans and the system they created themselves. We built a society that speeds ahead, but leaves no room for those left behind. We created fierce competition, but forgot that not everyone starts from the same starting line. We fail because we are asked to fight a world that refuses to give time to simply stop and rethink. We are forced to defy exhaustion without being given the chance to truly rest. Even rest itself must feel productive. Yet, humans are not machines. We are vulnerable, slow, full of wounds, and easily tired creatures. Precisely therein lies our humanity. We are flooded with data, definitions, classifications, and theories about humanity. From biology, psychology, to sociology, various terms and concepts emerge, as if we are getting closer to understanding ourselves. But in reality, amidst all of that, we become strangers to who we actually are. The more discussions there are about humanity, the blurrier the lines become. We may know more, but we understand less. We can explain almost everything in the sea, the sky, and the earth, except what it truly means to be a living human being. If reflected upon, life seems organized, as if everything has been arranged. Wake up early because we must, work according to schedule, obey traffic rules, rest at night, plan for tomorrow, set the alarm. We follow the flow because we are taught that if we are disciplined and patient, everything will be fine. We believe, or perhaps pretend to believe, that if we are orderly enough, everything will go according to plan. Life looks like a straight line, prepared long ago. But is that true? What if, in truth, life never had a blueprint of order? There is no grand design for our plans. There is no narrative guiding everything toward a logical and beautiful end. What if we were actually designed to fail? Is it possible that tomorrow will not be better?